ACC kickoff is just 3 weeks away. Summer is flying by. We're past the 4th of July. We are ready for some football and some football talk. And we are joined by Chapel Fowler, Clemson beat writer at the State newspaper in Columbia. You can find his content at Chapel Fowler on Twitter. 2 questions before we get started, Chapel. Have you joined Threads?
I have not joined Threads yet.
All right.
I have to admit that.
And what is your? We talked in the last segment about niche sports. What's your favorite niche sport?
Favorite niche sport? I play, but I'm not very good at disc golf. So
okay.
I'm nothing to write home about, but local course, Denver, North Carolina, easiest par 3 in the game. I can get you a negative every now and then. So I'd say that one.
Is disc golf going to have a moment? Is it going to be televised soon?
Disc golf is kind of popping off right now, Instagram-wise at least. I know that's just one metric, but I mean, they have some pretty dope videos. You can watch full rounds and stuff. Not on ESPN just yet, but we'll see what I can do.
And that's what Chapel's going to do once it's on ESPN. He's going to forget this whole covering Clemson thing. He's just going to dive into the disc golf professionally.
I've been intrigued by all the cornhole I've been seeing on ESPN. I think there's a future for me somewhere down the line. But you are not here to talk about disc golf or cornhole or any of these other sports that we'd love to play. You were here to talk some Clemson football, and I was there. I was in the house for the ACC title game last year when Clemson defeated UNC, and we sort of got the coming out party for quarterback Cade Klubnik. Clemson, once again, the favorite to win the ACC title. What is the talk down there in Clemson as we head into this offseason and we get ready for another ACC football season?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would have said the same thing about them being the favorite a few months ago, but now I'm wondering, once we get to kickoff and that pesky little media poll emerges, how close is it going to be with FSU? I think it's more, is Clemson down as opposed to is Clemson where it needs to be, with FSU right there on their tail. I think it's been 7 times in the last 8 years they've been picked as preseason champion. Again, that's only one indicator, but that is something I'm fascinated to see how it plays out. That's probably going to be the closest vote in, 5-6 years. But yeah, I mean, they went through spring ball and felt good, but who doesn't? They know where they are. They know where they need to be. Passing offense, passing defense. Those are the 2 things that Dabo Swinney has said over and over through spring ball. We need to get better in this and this. And, up until, the South Carolina loss, they still probably would have been in the CFP, up until that game that they controlled their own destiny, and they still could this year. So they're right there. There's multiple upper echelons for college football. If there's tier 1, 1A, 1B, 1C, maybe they're 1B or 1C right now. 2 losses and you're out under this current format. It'll be different next year. But they're right there, but they're not, that elite 16, 18 team that they were. And that's not exactly a bad thing, but you know how the expectations are. In a place like that, among many others, it's still a failure of sorts if you're not in the CFP, which is crazy to say, 11 wins is 11 wins. But that's kind of the standard they've created and the standard they're trying to maintain and kind of get back to that level of 6 straight. And that's 100% the focus. Anything other than that, will be, I think, no matter what they want to say, like that will be frustrating. That will be a failure in their eyes and fan base's eyes. Absolutely.
It's interesting, Chaplin. By the way, you mentioned how close Clemson and Florida State will be. The Vegas odds right now, Fan Duel, Clemson plus 150 to win the ACC, Florida State plus 185. So it is pretty close from that perspective, at least. It's interesting because you talk about Clemson and last year, and it's one of those things where I'm like, I think about Clemson last year. I'm like, man, that team did not look that good. You did the passing offense. The offense in general was not great. DJU struggled. And then you're like, oh, wait, yeah, that's right. They were almost in the CFP. What kind of pressure do you think is on Cade Klubnik and this offense to produce just based on how good the rest of that team is?
Yeah, I think there's a ton. The reason Dabo Swinney fired one of his best friends who he said it took him 15 seconds to hire for a position which he didn't interview any external candidates for when Johnny Elliott left last year is because that offense struggled and somebody had to take the fall for that. The expectations are huge for them, but I think it's big for the defense too. There's Dabo hired internally for both coordinators, Brandon Streeter, Wes Goodwin, fire Brandon Streeter, Wes Goodwin still around. Him, that defense, all those units. This is being talked like it's going to be an all-time Clemson defense. They have a number of really good defensive linemen. The linebacker combination of Trotter and Carter, who I'm sure everybody's talking about. They're on Pro Football Focus every week, I swear. Good front seven. Secondary, not as much. I mean, they have the bodies, they have the talent, but don't they always? There's pressure on Cade offense, pressure on defense too. I think it's really across the board because, the margin for error in a number of those games they won last year was really small. One play here, one play there, one kind of momentum change, 11-3. But that's any college football team. But 11-3 easily could have been worse than that. And, ACC is ACC. It maybe isn't SEC. But you can still, in the same way you can screw around and win a game, you can screw around and lose a game. So I think the pressure is definitely team-wide. But, I mean, you have to start with the offense just because that passing offense. Like one of my favorite Club Mix stats is that in that title game that Murph mentioned, I think within 10 pass attempts, he'd already completed the longest Clemson pass of the season, 68 yards or something to Cole Turner. That offense was just not vertical at all. And still, they were 10-2 at that point in the ACC title game. So it just goes to show you how, you don't have to be perfect across the board, 100 all the time to win. But what he showed in that game, and maybe didn't show as much against Tennessee, is what could unlock them a little bit further. Pressure is across the board, but I mean, it's more offense than defense for sure.
I wonder if we have to discount some of Club Nick's stats against that North Carolina defense, which made every quarterback look like a Heisman Trophy winner. Clemson opens the season at Duke on a Monday night game, Labor Day night, prime time, which they're used to. Clemson's certainly used to. Duke maybe not so much used to getting that primetime treatment. What I wanted to ask about was, we're in this NIL era and this transfer portal era, and it seems like, and this is the outside perception, so that's what I want to ask you about, that Clemson is kind of doing it the old school way, that they're not, hitting the transfer portal to fill every hole on their roster, that NIL, while I'm sure some players are taking advantage of it there at Clemson, we're not hearing about it like we are at Texas A&M and USC and other places. How is Dabo kind of managing this and trying to compete, like you said, at the tier 1A with the Georgias and the Alabamas of the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think portal-wise is where they continue to be so different than everybody else. The longest thing for a while was, Clemson doesn't do summer official visits. Clemson only offers a few, 100 or so people per class. Clemson doesn't offer underclass. And they've kind of adjusted in a lot of those ways. They'll offer a freshman or sophomore. They just got a 5-star linebacker who committed last month, and he was their first offer for the 24 class when he was a rising sophomore or something. They started doing summer official visits last year, and it was really successful, so they're continuing to do that. But portal stuff, they really have not budged. I mean, the last 2 cycles they have gone veteran backup quarterback who used to play at Clemson, Hunter Johnson, and veteran backup quarterback, Paul Tyson. Those are the 2 additions over the last 2 years. So they are very much built from the ground up, and that's really different than where everybody else is. That's caused some consternation among the fan base, but you can be concerned about that. But then, of course, they could also point to 11 wins. The team is still at that tier 1A, 1B, 1C, whatever you want to call it, level without that, and are really just seem steadfast on sticking to, I think the phrase Dabo uses over and over is bloom where you're planted. And you've seen so many teams do that portal stuff to success immediately. I mean, one of my favorite anecdotes there, in South Carolina's win against Clemson last year, the game-winning pass, the third down pass that clinched that and knocked Clemson out of the CFP was an Oklahoma transfer quarterback to James Madison transfer wide receiver. That was pretty poetic in that regard. So it helps a lot of teams. It can also hurt teams. It's not always perfect. But they are really steadfast in that. I mean, even FSU is another deal. I mean, FSU got 2 of South Carolina's best players in the portal this cycle and has them on the roster for that showdown in week 4. So they're steadfast in that. But NIL-wise, I mean, I think the phrase they've used over and over and over, and this, again, applies to everything they do, when you're at a level where you can be selective and picky about how you do things, I guess you can get away with that. The idea of doing it the Clemson way, not leading with it is what a lot of football recruits have kind of used and what the AD has said, doing it the Clemson way. But Dabo said, when they're on the screen plugging these collectives, which is such a crazy thing to think about considering how much of a no-no that was even a year before. It's doing it the Clemson way, but it doesn't mean they're not spending millions of dollars on it. They have a brand new branding facility right next to the football stadium that's adjacent to the football facility with they have a podcast interview room that's apparently really popular among the players. They have a photo shoot wall, the office for their in-house football-specific NIL coordinator. So, it's not like they're resting on their laurels. They are spending money on this and having it as an option, but kind of the strategy they've gone with is don't lead with. And I think when Adabas quotes about it, maybe a kickoff last year actually was, if a player said, "What can you do for me?" They're not for Clemson, I think was whatever he said along those lines. And that's kind of what everybody on the roster incoming has echoed. So those are two places where they're definitely kind of planting the flag in the sand, like they've done with a lot of the other things I mentioned recruiting-wise, to kind of differentiate themselves as, we're different. We are this brand that you're not going to get anywhere else. I mean, it continues to work recruiting-wise. So I guess until that stops working, they'll keep rolling with it.